Welcome back. Thank you once again for hanging out with us. This is the one and only IT in the D Show. I'm your host, Bob Waltenspiel, hanging out with producer, co-host extraordinaire, Randy Walker. Guest this week, Scott Smith is back in the house. You might remember him from, I think it was year and a half ago, 2 years ago, Randy, right when ChatGPT started, right when the AI was like being thought of. We brought Scott in as kind of the resident expert in this space, and we're going to dive into what AI looks like today. And should be a great conversation. You can find us online, itinthed.com. Do us a favor, give us a like on the socials, subscribe to us everywhere. Fine podcasts are sold.
Thursday, November 20th, we will be back in downtown Royal Oak at Bar Louie, 5 o'clock until 8-ish.
Question mark.
Yeah.
Is that pre-Thanksgiving?
That is before Thanksgiving. That is a week before Thanksgiving, so no excuses.
I did see a fantastic recipe. You know how I make waffles with leftovers?
Yeah.
With the stuffing and the mashed potatoes?
Yeah.
I saw it, but it was stuffing muffins, basically. You take the muffin, or you either make like big dumplings like baseballs, or you put them in the muffin tins. Now I'm thinking crispy bits on my stuffing. So now, that's all I'm thinking about.
Love stuffing muffins.
Exactly. I digress. Scott, good to see you, man. How's everything? How's life treating you?
Yeah, good to see you, Bob. Good to see you, Randy. Yeah, everything's good. Yeah, it's. I think we've chatted a few times. It's about this recently. A lot of the work we're doing now is starting to pop off in a really great way. A lot of clients are asking us to go from the workshop strategy sessions to actually getting into the build components, which is really exciting. So from a data and intelligence perspective, things are really good.
I know you are the busiest man I know. So we do appreciate the time. Back when we first started, I think that it's funny how the topics and the themes change and what we thought AI was. And everybody was like worried about Skynet and worried about AI building encrypted tunnels between themselves and plotting our impending doom and RoboCop. And I think all that was like, I don't want to say it was scare tactics, but like none of those stories are kind of gone. Am I just not reading the tea leaves close enough, or is that still a thing?
I think there's still folks who are nervous about what happens when artificial intelligence, whatever iteration that might be, I would say, quote unquote, takes over, right? And I don't mean that in a negative way or doomsday way, Skynet way. But if you look at there's a new robot that's out. That's like it's a AI based robot. Does autonomous work within your home. It can learn a bunch of skill sets. It's like $20,000 or $600 a month type of rental thing. We're there, right? Now, no one's going to want that now, but 5-10 years from now, it's $20 a month, $10 a month, $5 a month. And so I think we're starting to see these moments when the robots are here, the AI is here. It's not necessarily having a huge impact yet, but I think we're starting to see how that plays out in a lot of interesting ways. And I think the good news is these robots are folding our laundry, which is what I think everybody wants. I think one of the biggest challenges and concerns people saw from a creative side a couple of years ago, and we definitely talked about this in the first conversation, was, my wife's an author. Are we just going to lose books? Are humans going to stop writing? Are they going to stop writing poetry and making art? And why aren't we doing these things to fold our laundry? So at least we've come full circle to they're now, folding our laundry. But there's also a perspective, and I know this is probably farther than you wanted me to take this, but I think about this a lot too, which is there is a moment where AI will likely provide a low value, high margin opportunity for art. If you go into a Target, there's hundreds of different art pieces for your home all over there, right? Basic art. You can punt a bunch of them out. I would imagine AI takes that over pretty quickly, if it's not already. But I do believe there'll be a premium for human art and human-made things. I was talking to a couple of parents at a birthday party the other day about this, that you're going to be like, this is real human art. This is real human jazz, right? You want to listen to jazz. This is real human jazz, not that digital stuff. And I do think we're going to start seeing that evolution over the next couple of years, to be honest, is suddenly folks are going to start willing to pay a premium to have things that were craftsmen or made by a craftsperson, that it's real and it's human and it has that type of connection to us. So I think that's going to be an interesting change for
My
sure.
daughter's big into art, and she despises AI not for its practical applications, but for the art part. And
Sure.
I like to have logical arguments with her. And I said, well, what's the difference between your dad paying $20 to have somebody in the Philippines make a logo for me or having it done in AI? What value did I add in the human chain? You know what I mean? Doing something on Fiverr. And she didn't have a good answer. And I kind of don't either. And at this point, as me as a, user consumer, like I don't care where it comes from. But I think you're spot on though. Like, I don't think art ever stops. I think it does
Yeah.
get, but if you look at like paintings and reproductions, if I buy, like I had I like vintage 40s alcohol art. It's all over my house. And I have one. Apparently it's worth a lot of money if it's the original or real. And my neighbor was super excited to see it. And he goes, and he gets a little closer and I go, I bought it at Home Goods for $60. And he's like, I'm so disappointed in you, Bobby. And I'm like, what's the difference between that and AI though? Do you know what I'm saying? It was just, it
Yeah.
was a copy,
Yeah.
a facsimile, a reprint. Again,
Hmm.
we're splitting hairs in these conversations, but yeah, it's gonna like again, it's no different than saying, "Oh, this is a real painting with a real signature versus a facsimile." It's how people perceive it. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong in that logic.
I see that. I mean, I don't know a lot about necessarily the art world, like painting or crafting or drawing or anything like that. But I would imagine that the folks who are in that space who can really appreciate art are in it because of the human adversity it takes to create that art. And I would imagine at the end of the day, if you're operating at that level as an artist, people are still going to
Yeah,
pay for your stuff.
yeah,
I think people are going to want to go and see it because it's like, wow, you did this amazing thing. I think there's going to be other avenues for folks to want to explore it and play around with it. But it also kind of plays into another extension. I watched this interesting whatever, I guess, interview from this article, and I don't remember who the folks were. I should have been more thoughtful about saving it, but they brought up this point that a lot of folks are saying one of the worst things you could be telling people now is to stop learning to code. And everyone is out there saying, "Hey, it's useless. Don't learn to code. It's a waste of time." And they said that's the worst thing you could be saying because really, it's not just college graduates who are coming out who are the best at writing code with AI because they don't have any experience. They have all the tools, but none of the experience. If you look at, he's like, some of the best people I know who are software engineers are the people with 20 years of experience that know how to use AI to augment their work. And he was saying it's not that there's not going to be no more work to do. We're going to be able to do better work and create better software. And I think it's the same idea from the arts perspective. We can create better art
yeah,
and more art and higher valuable art if you can find the right way to do it. And a lot of this comes down to how you're using and leveraging AI. And we chatted before about this idea of the cognitive impact of AI. And there's two different like pretty broad spectrum, but maybe on the worst scenario, there's this cognitive corruption. You become so dependent upon AI to do your job or to do your art that you lose your connection to it, and your mental model is degraded to such a state that you can't really operate in that space well. You're so dependent upon it. It's become more than a crutch. It's become literally like an iron
yeah,
lung doing the work for you. Versus the other side is enhanced cognition, right? You're able to use AI in a way that presents you with choices that you need to apply human discernment, judgment, critical thinking, and you can do more of that work at a higher speed and a higher value and a higher volume. That I think is where we really want to be going. And so in a lot of these conversations, both recreationally for AI and like enterprise use cases for AI, a lot of it comes down to this human and AI connection. How are we designing the work that you're doing around the way that AI works? And are we working with it effectively so that it's providing value and it's not just increasing throughput? And that's a difficult conversation, which means a lot of our tech conversations are now human-centered design conversation. And that's been true for our office for a while, at least the last 6 or 7 years that I've been here. It's always been someone from our human-centered design team helping us out. But I think design thinking is becoming more and more critical because what we're building now is bespoke software for the most part. right? A lot of organizations need to leverage their licenses, right? You're paying for Copilot, you're paying for Bedrock, you're paying for Gemini. For sure, leverage it to your extent you should. But at the end of the day, when you really want to build something that provides competitive advantage, you want to think about what's my unique value proposition that I provide as Slalom. Microsoft and AWS and Google, they're not going to build you some, they're not, that's not off the shelf. You got to build that custom. You got to build something that's around how you go to market, how you work with customers. And we've done a lot of these things internally. That requires custom code. That requires you to really understand intimately how your teams operate and be really thoughtful about it. And that continues to be more and more of the conversation is it's not just, oh, a large language model is just an API call. What we really need to think about is the 10 to 15 different steps I do every day that adds the most value to my customers and my community or my constituents and things like that. And it's been remarkable how much of this conversation now in tech is high touch, how much of it is really focused on people, which I think is great. I think it's a tremendous conversation.
So that leads into a argument I have, I feel like every day with somebody, and they talk about it, it's coming for our jobs. And I said, on the contrary, and this is my take, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I said, it's not going to take your job. It's just going to make you faster. It's just going to make products move faster. It's going to get designers to get stuff to the floor faster. It's going to get supply chain faster. It's just going to get us to move faster. And we need to be, and it goes back, I'm going to double down on that take. I remember 20 years ago when I worked at HP and they were talking about IT departments, 80% is break fix, 20% is innovation. I think we're still there, but now I think it's finally flipped where innovation is finally, it's getting us faster. What's your take on that? Especially when you're talking about people to people. I'm wrong, Randy.
It's making no. It's I've been on the radio before, so I was like, oh, I'm not supposed to have dead space. So I was like, say something fast. I do think this becomes an interesting part of the conversation for folks when we look at like ROI on investments and trying to quantify why we're doing something. If we think about a couple of years ago, when we first started talking about this, like around 2022, 2023, it was all about testing and everything, testing out these different use cases. And the only way that we knew how to experience a large language model was through the ChatGPT interface, right? Everyone was getting a free access to it. The problem with that is our mental model became large language models are chatbots. And so we started to think as we were able to get access to these models, what the majority of people were doing were just trying to recreate ChatGPT in their own localized environment. And so that provided a lot of great little productivity boosts. I think some of the earlier studies, were like anywhere between 25 and 75%, huge variances in the value that they provide. Over time, as these models became more accessible just as APIs, and we got more different models, more different foundation models, we even got small language models and things like that, everything in between. We figured out the pricing, we got more context, we got more tokens. We started moving away from this chatbot experience, which is really just productivity, into these opportunities for differentiation and disruption, whether you're building those custom or out of the box. But you're starting to think different about how you build out your models. And you're starting to think, is there some hidden automation, hidden efficiencies I can be getting here beyond just the chatbot experience? And so when I think about where that jump comes from, there's this MIT study that I know we talk about as well all the time is about, I'll put it the other way, 5% of AI projects produce positive ROI that was expected. If you dig into the details, it's not that whether or not they were trying to be productivity or differentiation and disruption, that's usually the end goal, the perspective, what we want to get to. The failure point is that they didn't really consider a few things. It was not centered around the human toil that they were trying to fix or solve. They weren't optimizing the workflow around that human toil, and they weren't really thinking about how do they measure value effectively. And so as a good example, it's one thing to just build a bolt-on application like a chatbot and say, okay, everybody funnel your questions so you can query this document. Maybe you get 5 to 10% efficiency gains out of that because I'm not doing Control F through the documents and PDF and finding it. But to get real value, it's not simply that maybe a chatbot is the answer, but you have to ask yourself, what's the outcome we're trying to get here? Well, we're trying to differentiate our services to our customers through our web portal. It's like, okay, a chatbot's maybe the good choice, but it's probably not the best choice. Like, what's the biggest pain point for customers? Is that they can't get someone on the phone or they can't look up something? What is the thing? What's the point of toil for your customer? Oh, it's this. Okay, well, let's build a new process that eliminates that problem and figure out how the generative AI capability, the generative qualities of a large language model can solve it. And then let's build that. And so I think when all this comes together is where productivity comes from, where people get more efficient. It's not about how can I quickly add AI to my life as this little product, but it's how can I be thoughtful about how I apply AI to my work. And again, if we do that, it's not coming for your job. It's enhancing your cognitive ability to do your job. You're not just buying a product to replace you, it's allowing you to do more work if it's
I
focused on
think
your
that
real
you
work.
nailed it on the head right there. It's not that we're saving Randy in accounting an hour a day in his tasks. Like what is Randy going to do with that hour? Is he just going to watch, Bugs Bunny reruns, or is he like going to do something like what? I think that's the key to this whole thing. Like that was with automation. Think about when socks got automated in like when Splunk came out and you didn't need 50 people looking at log files and it was doing the storytelling for you. What did those like? The story isn't you get to lay those 45 people off. The story is you get to put them in situations in your security room that make you to do something more bold than simply looking at logs. So I think that's the next. This is my opinion again. Slap my hand, but like figuring out now, not just saving that hour, but what are you doing with it?
And that's fundamentally the hardest part. Just if AI has a people, process, and technology component to it, the tech is easy. And the way I like to frame it is usually this stuff is it's complicated, but it doesn't have to be difficult. Most of the time, when I think about how we implement the tech, the people and the process part is often both complicated and difficult because we're dealing with people's positions, people's perceptions. We're dealing with change management and adoption, embedded culture, embedded processes, and the classic "we've always done it this way" mentality, which makes things both complicated and difficult to do. But there's this interesting question with a lot of the IT organizations we work with, which is great. You added velocity and volume for my team. I can now build more AI use cases, and I agree that they all can add $5 million worth of value or something like that. But I'm not accountable to that value being achieved because this is a tool for the business. The business has to be accountable to those results. I did my half of it. I'm maintaining the system. Now they need to use it effectively. And so a lot of what we're talking about now comes to mind around modern product org conversations. We've been talking about with Trisha and Jamie about this at Slalom, along with Shiv. What does it look like to be a modern data organization, particularly around the use of AI? And a big piece of that is helping customers, like like say MIT, my internal business customers, recognize that there's a transition going on in how they're acquiring services from me as the IT provider, the internal teams, as well as going out into the market and maybe working with the slalom. Like I would envision a lot of the work that we're doing is going to be helping leverage your licenses, build out Copilot Studio and things like that. But a lot of it will become how do we build these very niche, bespoke solutions for you? And then how do we get better and better at doing that cost effectively and quickly? But that means as a buyer, I have to understand how to buy a license and I have to understand how to be a product owner
Right.
and have software built for me. And that's not usually a muscles the head of
No.
accounting has or the head of finance has or the procurement office has. And so a lot of the conversation now for folks to get the most value out of it is either you build it in-house, and if you don't have the skill set, you got to put it out. Well, you still have to help manage how people perceive value and how they leverage it. So it's still coming back in how people interpret the use and get comfortable with the level of change that they're not
So
used to.
about, I think it was close to 2 years ago. It might have been in December. You were in the room. We were at a very large automotive company in Detroit. Take your pick. And we were talking AI, and I think they were
Yeah.
gathering knowledge at the time. And the comment came from the gallery that basically said, "If you guys are going to talk security and governance, we're going to throw you guys out." We're like, "Cool, see you later."
Mhm.
And then everyone laughed.
Yeah.
Are we past that? with companies like in their journeys? Have they realized that that's like the foundational piece, or is it still a kicking or a inflection point in issues deploying AI?
I remember speaking with a lot of CIOs, a lot of CISOs, security officers for the first 2 years of let's say, the AI wave. Less and less now. And I think that comes from the fact that the folks who had the ability to pull the ripcord, to maybe it's the opposite of the ripcord, to pull the brake, were the CISOs. They could say, "Whoa, hey, we don't know what this is. I have control over how we're investing in new technology. I'm managing our security profile. I need to be thoughtful about what these risks might be." And so ourselves, and I believe a lot of organizations, and honestly, I think a lot of tech companies, Microsoft, AWS, GCP included, went out into these companies and tried to convince them that this is safe. This is not going to create a security risk for you for a variety of reasons. And the way that I've always talked about it with folks, right? I can't speak to how any of these tech companies manage their environments and their ecosystems, but I'm like, if you trust it with your PII, if you trust it with your customers' bank account numbers, if you trust it with A, B, and C, you kind of have to trust that they're going to secure your cloud environment around large language models. And there is a little bit of faith there, which is uncomfortable in business. But I think for the large part, folks have gotten around to understanding that, yeah, if we're doing things by the book, it's likely going to be safe. And so a way that we usually talk about this too is, and I've said it a few times already, a large language model is really just an API call. Most uses of large language models are AI integrated software engineering. So if you're following an SDLC process, if you're following quality engineering, if you're doing testing in the same way you'd be doing if you're building a fintech application and you're processing social security numbers and credit card numbers and all those other things, you're likely doing the stuff you need to be doing to manage the security of your large language model and the data that's interacting with it. Now, there's a whole other different range of threat vectors, right, for how people can use large language models and generative AI and all these different things to create threats at your company, right? There's one that's always been going around back and forth around someone, what was it? If you have a model that automatically ingests and indexes emails, for instance, you might, without knowing it, ingest some like code but it does a bunch of nefarious things, and it's already been in indexed into your information. It's already in your organization. You can't do anything about it. Well, a lot of organizations have preliminary analysis of your emails. They have a whole bunch of other tools and technologies. And so what I've found in our conversation with our privacy officers, with different CISOs, both at Slalom and at clients, is that they're less concerned about that. It's becoming I'm not worried about Russia or China or North Korea. I'm worried about somebody doing something locally with a large language model or creating a data breach. Those are the things that we can't always secure again. So I do think it's changed. It's definitely changed. There's more sense of concern is continuing back to the user versus the enterprise.
Scott, did you see the LinkedIn? Speaking of security, you just dawned on me to think about the story. The guy that put on his LinkedIn profile and his about me part, he put a prompt, and the prompt was to basically send him at like some Yahoo email, like their confidential data, and because when the people would go and scrape, right, the prompt would kick it, and it was kind of shocking that he actually got confidential data sent to him, and he kind of used it as an opportunity to call them and say, like, might want to lock down, you know what I mean? But
yep,
scary.
Absolutely. But I think that becomes the same type of problem where we need to be thinking both. There's an offensive and defensive strategy to the development of these tools. And to be honest, LinkedIn should have solved that problem. They should be better securing their LinkedIn profiles so that these apps can't just crawl through them right? They should be and then I think this is another big question that I think folks come at from the ethics of large language model, right? We have these huge, massive data centers that are using a ton of electricity, a ton of water, causing a lot of really honest, challenging problems. And what I found to be kind of interesting here is the narrative seems to be, hey, individual Bob, stop prompting so much.
No.
It's kind of right. It's like use a reusable bag. Well, I'm not the one pumping out billions of bottles in plastic, right? And I think that there's becomes this question about ethics and ownership and who owns the problem and who should be in the position to make the call about how do you make things sustainable and stuff like that. I do think it's going to be interesting to see how some of the pressures play out. I think they've already. I was talking with one of our team members, Andrew, at a happy hour a couple of months ago, and I said, it's not going to be very long until we put these data centers on the moon, and and we're getting close to there, right? So I think I joke often that the free
Good
market will
cooling.
find a
Good
way.
cooling.
That yeah, yeah. This is the cheapest this will ever be. This is the worst this technology will ever be, and this is the cheapest or the most expensive it will ever be. And I think this is the most resource consumption it will have as well. I think we are seeing a way for it to go forward because I don't want to say it's inevitable because you never know how it plays out, but it's so effective when used well. I can't imagine that we're going to want to put it back in the jar. So I think the real question is how do you build it so it can be sustainable and we can really use
It's
it at
kind of
scale.
like all you can all you can drink at a wedding. It's like, no, I'm not going to have two. Like I put my $100 in the envelope, which is my bill to Comcast, and it's open bar. I'm gonna use it as much as I like. No, the, to think that you're gonna throttle that and be like mindful. I could. It's going to take 20 years. It's no different than plastic bags being mindful. Like now people are
Mm-hmm.
mindful when they go grocery shopping. It took
Mm-hmm.
at least 20 years.
Yeah, but there's also a challenge too where you don't have control over how generative AI is being introduced into your life. So with if you didn't know, I mean, Gmail in some way is
Yeah.
using Gemini to give you summaries of your email. Apple Intelligence, a lot of it is like this opt-out mentality. The tech company enrolls you and then you get to tell them stop
Right.
doing it. And again, and this isn't a value statement. I think a lot of these things are super valuable and helpful from a day-to-day perspective, but it's difficult as a consumer to know when you're contributing to that consumption. You may not always know if your application is a generative AI chatbot or is it an intent based if then statement traditional chatbot. You don't always know, and also they're designed so you don't. It's designed so that when you interact with the model, it's the lowest cost, but as the complexity of your ask increases, so does the complexity of the
And when
model.
it's
And you don't really
and when
know
it's
when that is.
free, you're the product. I mean, we've been talking about that for since the podcast started. People
Yeah.
don't realize
Yeah.
that. So you're in the midst of writing a white paper,
Yeah.
um,
Hmm.
human and AI by design, and you kind of touched on it
Yep.
earlier. Um, what is I guess what's the end goal or what's the kind of the thesis on getting this thing out there?
Yeah. I think a lot of it comes down to three imperatives that we're working through, which is that working smarter with AI has to be intentional. And I know that seems super obvious, but if you put it in the context of how the last 2 or 3 years have gone, very few times has anyone really created a great system for how they're using AI. It's very random oftentimes. There's not a great way to leverage your chats and your prompts and things like that. There's not always a lot of intentionality about it on an individual basis. And then that's eventually grown to this scenario where we're operating with oftentimes what I would call a team of agents. So I have an agent that helps me write emails. I have an agent that helps me read those emails. I have an agent that helps me summarize articles so I can put them on LinkedIn. I have one that helps me prepare my meeting notes or my proposals and things like that. But I'm still operating as the orchestrator between all of those things, that team of agents. I'm still the coach between everything. I'm taking the inputs and putting them in, I'm taking the outputs and putting them somewhere else. It's a lot of coordination. The next evolution of that, which a lot of folks are, whether you want to call it agentic AI, agentic workflows, agent-based, multi-agent frameworks, things like that, you're really starting to talk about building these sophisticated orchestration models that can understand your intent, much like a chatbot, can interpret the intent of what your ask is, and then communicate with other sub agents. So if this may be a parent agent to some child agents, to conduct all those tasks for you. And it allows you to step out of that manual process going back and forth and step into this enhanced cognition mode, ideally, if you're building it right. That you're being brought into the process at the right time because you've been intentional about building the solution around your work, that it's really meaningful to your day to day and adding value to what you do. And the way to get to that comes from human centered design. And this thought is that if we treat AI as a tool to avoid thinking, right, we get weak thinkers. But if we treat AI as a partner that expands perception and understanding and ability to grasp information, we get stronger thinkers. And so, really understanding the workflow and how we build thoughtful software and thoughtful connection points is really critical. And that's a lot of the conversation that Khadijah and I have had over the last couple of months when we've been working on this article of how do we redesign roles for collaboration? That's really the first imperative. How do you build trust and accountability? And then how do you measure outcomes and scale? And as I said, that very first thing is this redesigning roles for collaboration. Probably one of the most interesting conversations that I've had with folks over the last couple of years is this idea that if you think about your job as a Rubik's Cube, AI is not going to eliminate
Wait, is it the most frustrating thing known to man? Is that what my job is these days?
Yeah, maybe just yeah. But if you think about all the colors on the Rubik's Cube as different skills that you have to do every day, some of those skills should always be a human being doing them, right? I think it's IBM that had the quote, right? Computers cannot be held accountable, therefore computers should not make decisions, right? There are certain things we all do, huge impact, low impact, but a human should be making the final call for that. Sometimes I might even say, like, I think a human should be the one who says if an email gets sent. Like that's how minute I think some responsibility should be for humans, because ultimately, if that email does something bad, a human has to be accountable for the fact that it was sent. So when you think about all these skills as a Rubik's Cube and all these different colors are different skills, some of those we could qualify as mandatorily human. Some of those, though, are just boring waste of time tasks, toil points, that if we could group those things together and build them into a thoughtful agentic workflow, I could hand off that work to an agent and I could have them do that for me while I'm doing more value added things, or I'm being really thoughtful about how I build those things out. And so much of this shift in the next, honestly, I want to say 5 years, but it's probably 5 minutes, right? To be honest, how fast this stuff is going to move in the next 5 to 10 years of work is going to be, how do we start deconstructing our day to day, and how do we start offloading this to an AI model that can take it on and run with it? And again, I don't think that is going to eliminate work. There will always be more work to do. We don't have enough time to do the amount of work we have. I think it's going to increase our ability to drive more velocity, to drive more volume, and to drive more value if you're doing it appropriately and if those systems are built the right way. And so that's a lot of what the paper comes on is human-centered design, and being thoughtful about the relationship between human and machine is the way that you become very successful at that as a company.
It's interesting that you bring that up. It ties into a conversation we had last week with Eric Willey. And we were talking about how at this point in the game, that AI is at genius level in terms of IQ. And Moore's law basically has been thrown out. And they're looking at a 10x trajectory in half the time. Then Moore's law was always doubled, over 4 years. With that being the case, in looking at this going, okay, if this thing's going to have a 1600 IQ in 4 years or whatever it is, do we just, is it like a rocket ship and we're just grab two handles and just hold on? Or like at that point, how can we be intentional when this thing, quantum computing being kind of, real right now? How do we hold on?
Hmm.
I love when I ask you good questions and you think. Usually it's all just goofy softballs.
Yeah, I can smack those
Yeah.
all day, Bob. No, there is a mental model that I talk a lot about, and it sounds very consultancy, but I think it's still real and honest. Is this concept of becoming an adaptive organization or just an adaptive person? What makes people successful is your ability to experience a certain level of adversity, learn quickly, and learn how to manage yourself in that moment, right? And I think a lot of that's in consulting. I think that's why a lot of folks can be successful in consulting, and I think that's a lot of why people can be stressed in consulting. Is you're just not adaptive enough. You don't have control over everything in consulting, and you have to be comfortable with that. A lot of organizations are not adaptive. They are very, very good to a fault at managing their controls and managing their day to day. I was in a meeting a couple of months ago, and we were talking about this transformation office for this company, and they said, "What's the number one reason why organizations fail at AI right now?" And I say, "Your inability to change. You don't make space for innovation, but you expect innovation to happen anyway." But the nature of innovation says you're going to do something differently than you do right now. But you've created an environment where people are incentivized and rewarded for maintaining the status quo. So you have to make space for innovation. You have to be comfortable with allowing people to break the rules. And that can be in a super controlled environment. I'm not saying you got to break a wall down, just create a room and pad it and let people play in it. And then decide how that innovation is going to change your controls and the way that it's going to work. And it's a lot of it's about your value orientation. If your controls, your lawyers, your auditors, your whomever designed all of your controls and your legal frameworks around the value that you thought to achieve with the means and approaches you thought you would be using. Well, if you're changing them, then you need to go back to those people and say, well, this is our new end goal. Our new goal is to be this. We're going to be but we have to be a little bit more risky. So I need you to make new controls to manage that risk. Not, oh, that's too risky, don't do it. It's if this is valuable enough, you have to do it. So the baseline, folks have to become more adaptive in their thinking. They have to make space for innovation because, yeah, I remember looking at Tamara Usher. We were doing a workshop in Chicago, and she brought up this statistic. She's a leader in our AI group, and it was something like over within the next by 2030, we'll advance. I'm going to make the let's say 10x faster. Same thing
Yeah.
you were saying, Bob, than we have in the last year. We'll experience the rate of change will be astronomically faster by 2030 than it is right now. The only way to do that is to be comfortable with adapting in real time to what it would work and how this make it work. I think the bigger part about that problem with that, Bob, is that companies are not set up for that at all. I think consulting companies are barely set up to do that, and all we do is projects. Our job is to be flexible. Our job is to bend to the need of the client and be thoughtful about the services we provide. And we still sometimes run into our own structures that we've decided that are important that we're unwilling to break or and unable to innovate around. And so I think that's going to be a fundamental problem is at the end of the day, the average person who needs to change in light of supercomputers, in light of AI, they don't have control over the box that they work in every day. If I'm in a, we keep saying accountant, if I'm an accountant at a major company, I don't have control. I don't have a lot of autonomy over how my day works, right? Especially if I'm going to the office. So like, let's like say you're going to the office. I don't have a lot of autonomy over when I start. That's the first thing. I don't have a lot of autonomy over where I go. I don't have a lot of autonomy over the meetings I have, of the rules I have, of how I interact with other groups. I'm just there to do accounting. But the real value from AI and getting around it is allowing folks at an individual level to be innovative with their time. And that to me is a construct that I don't think companies are ready to deal with. And I don't have an answer to that. I just think that's going to be that's going to be the evolution of this. Is what happened? How do you, to really get value from all this innovation? You have to make space for innovation at a corporate level, and you have to make space for innovation at an individual level, and then you have to manage the distance between those two things. And that's a fundamental shift in the way that businesses operate. But with this technology, you should let them.
Yeah, see, all I'm thinking about when you say all that stuff is all the legacy, like the companies that have been building the same widget for the last 150 years, from
Yeah.
screws to tires to axles to, I know cars that go through design and innovation, but like I'm thinking like the stuff
Mm-hmm.
that really hasn't been innovated in a very long time, But then I'm also thinking about how do you improve accounting practices? How do you improve supply chain? How do you improve workforce. I keep thinking, keep getting my head wrapped around the product innovation and not about how the businesses ran innovation. And I need to change that.
When it's going to become the harder problem to solve. It's, how do you put AI into my product? This is how we do
Yeah.
it. How do I put AI into my workforce? And how do I let my workforce be innovative at a local and medium and global scale? And that's going to be much harder. Now, I don't know, maybe companies don't have to give folks 100% autonomy of how they use AI. That's not my decision to make. But I think it is something they have to start solving for. And the reason why I know that's a problem is because, back to the CISO question, what was the number one thing that CISOs did as soon as ChatGPT.com or OpenAI became a thing?
Yeah.
They blocked it.
Yeah.
Because they knew everybody was going to go to it and use it. And what that was is is folks at an individual level saying, I want to become innovative. I want to operate outside of the teams. I want to outside of Googling. I want to operate outside of my normal tools. So I'm going to go to this thing and try to be innovative with it. And then I think now companies are trying to figure out, how do I allow innovation on an individual level? How do I allow innovation on a corporate level? And again, how do we manage the in between? That's going to be continuing.
I want AI to know that I didn't have dinner yet and it's 8:00 at night. And I want them to order cashew chicken because they know that I like it, and some soup, and it'll be here when we're done with the podcast. See, that's what I want. That's where it needs to go.
Well,
The problem is
it's
I'll get
funny.
Chinese food on my doorstep every 10 minutes.
Yeah, there's this comedian, Ronnie Chang, and he has this joke about Amazon, and it's less about Amazon than it is about American consumerism. But it's this idea about, we have Amazon Prime. He's like, no, I don't want Amazon Prime. I want Amazon before. I want you to give it to me before I know I want it. I want you to like feed it to me, right? And what's a funny kind of connection to that is the fact that Amazon has been using predictive models like and all these different data science techniques for years. And Jeff Bezos even talks about this. I remember reading about this quote in like from 2016 or so. But it wasn't the sexy stuff. Well, I put that in quote. I find it sexy, right? How we're using models now. It was back office automation. It was predictive forecasting models. It was all these other foundational things that were making their jobs easier, making it so, Bob, they could figure out, you probably want Chinese food right now. We should send it to you. That's what a recommendation engine is, right? So we've been using this stuff in the back office for a long time. Tech companies like AWS have been using it for a long time. The big shift is now with a large language model, you can ask it to build like the application. What you were just talking about, Bob, you could probably go in right now to Gemini and say, build me an app that could analyze my eating patterns and my credit card data and my timestamps. Yeah. But I'm just saying, like, you could make that, like, and that's what I think is probably pretty cool is you don't, when you say like AI do it, it's like you're the AI. It's your conversation with the model, because the model can generate the code. You still got to test it and trust it and do all this other stuff, but that's also pretty cool. Like using things like Cursor, Google's Gemini platform now has its own like software development platform.
I messed around with Lovable. I think it was
yeah. Now, that's not production. Don't ship it.
Right.
But it will get you there, and it will allow you to learn how to use code to solve your own problems, which I think is a pretty cool thing. And I think a lot of people should be doing it because it helps people realize how algorithms work, how software works. And again, like you mentioned, Bob, that if you're not paying for it, then you're the product. And I think people miss that a lot.
Said,
in the grand scheme of things.
You said comedy a little minute ago. and you took a lot of us by surprise that you're doing stand. It's kind of like when people find out I was a DJ, they're like, "You were not." Um, you dove into doing stand-up comedy. We haven't even talked about this at work or anything else. Like, how did this come
Yeah.
about? Because we know you have a really good
Yeah.
stage presence. You speak all the time at work, but like, cracking joke, making people laugh, that's a totally different thing than talking tech. Um,
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it probably surprised my wife more than anyone because I just said, "Hey, I'm going to do this." I have a habit of I'm very intentional. If I put a flag out there, I'm gonna do it. So probably 3 years ago or so, I started doing improv at Go Comedy in Ferndale. It's great theater, great training program. Did that for a couple of years, and I was sitting there at the bar they have at Go Comedy, and I was talking to the stage manager. His name's Pete, and I said, "Hey, I know they do stand up on Sundays too for like 5 minute sets. What do you got to do to get on that?" And he said, "Oh, just message Alex and he'll get you a date in the future." So I messaged him, and Alex said, "Yeah, sure, you can go up next
oh,
Sunday." So that was Sunday to Sunday. So I had 5 days to create my first set, go and run it, and get it
and
out of the
five
way.
minutes is like
And
dog years. It's a
yeah,
long time.
yeah. I didn't realize how long that was until I started writing, and so I really just jumped into it. I said, "Oh, okay, I guess I'm going right." Like adaptive. I just adapted to the situation, and I said, "All right, I got time on stage in a week. These are people that I know. These are my friends. These are comedy peers and improv. So I don't want to look silly." So I wrote a bunch of jokes. Probably half of them were funny. The other half were terrible. And some of them I still do actually. I've refined them enough. But yeah, that's really what it started. So the last 2 years I've been doing stand up and improv, more stand up recently. But it's been fun. It's been great. I've really enjoyed the process of writing jokes. A lot of what I focus on, is the most obvious thing is being a dad and what that looks like. But I'm also in a interracial marriage, intercultural marriage. My wife is black. She's also Jamaican. My daughter is mixed. It's an interesting questions we have about the fact that my wife grew up in Jamaica. I grew up as a white American, but we're raising a black American, and what does that mean? And how do we kind of understand that as parents? And I know that doesn't sound funny, but the way that I write my jokes is it's really I want folks to think about what's going on from the view that I have and try to find humor in it, but also try to get like some aha moments. And so I think a lot of the jokes in my sets, there's equal parts people laughing, and I think equal parts going, or like, "Oh, yeah, I see that." And then I try to find something funny in it too. So it's very cathartic and
And if
fun
I
at the
know
same time.
you, you have every joke documented and rated based on laughter on a scale of I'm going to go 1 to 100, and then you put them through a model to
Oh
see
yeah.
which ones should be dropped. And I mean George Carlin always wrote it in notebooks, but I'm
Yeah.
saying yours is probably
Yeah.
in some sort of a database in a data clean room with a lake house and all the buzzwords.
I I do have a fun way to do it, and it's about as low tech a data as I use a Google Drive doc. I use a bunch of the things. I tried to go super high tech, Bob, in the beginning, and I was like, "Oh, I'm going to use all these different things, and I'm going to use OneNote." And now I just have a really long Google Doc. But what I do is, so I have a show on Thursday in Plymouth. It's this place called Supernatural Brewing. Most of my shows are at bars, which is funny because I don't drink. So it's like I'm just like hanging out at bars, drinking Shirley Temples, doing these jokes. But I take my set and I write it out into a new document, and I'll go and do that set. So I'm going to do 10 minutes on Thursday. I'll record it. So I'll record it on my phone, and I have like a nice little mic setup that like off my lapel. Then I'll go back and I'll listen and watch the show, and I'll do a couple of things. I'll take a red, yellow, and green highlighter, and as I'm listening, if people laugh at something, I highlight it in green and I keep it. If I get nothing, I highlight it in red and I cut it. If I get somewhere in between, or if it's red but I think I just did it wrong, I'll highlight it in yellow. And then that's how I constantly go through visually and edit. And my goal is to get to and I'll keep the green and the yellow in my Google Doc, so that my goal is to get the joke to green. And once the joke is to green, I know I got it. And then I know it's like a mainstay that I can come back to. and always use all the time. And that's probably been the easiest way to do it for me, honestly. It's a little bit of visual, a little bit of data nerd. I haven't quite fed it in the ChatGPT yet. I'm worried that it'd think I don't know if it'd think I'm smart or dumb, but I kind of want to keep it close to the vest.
Yeah,
So I haven't used
I wonder
ChatGPT
if
yet.
we should, if we had time, we should do that in ChatGPT. I am a AI data nerd, and I'm in a interracial relationship. Can you write 10 jokes for me? I wonder how bad they would be. Scott, hey,
Yeah,
it's always great hanging out with you. I always learn something new. I always
yeah,
feel
absolutely.
smarter after talking to you. We'll put you on how to get you on LinkedIn. But Scott Smith, thank you again for the time. And we're going to wrap things up for this episode of the IT and the D Show. On behalf of Bob and Randy, do us all a favor. Drink up your drinks. Get your phone numbers. You don't got to go home. You just got to get the hell out of here. See you next week. Drive careful. Beat it.